Hey guys, what is up? And welcome to episode 1 of the All the Glory podcast. And I'm your podcast host, Caly Culkin. I'm a friend, a daughter, a sister, addicted to these Aspire nutrient drinks that I've been drinking for about a week. But most importantly, I'm a follower of Jesus. So this episode, we're going to be covering navigating relationships in today's world. And we live in a world of Tinders and Bumble and swipes and hookups, and we're just going to take a deep dive into all of it because I think that we need to discuss it. It needs to be talked about more. Being a young adult is not easy in this day and age. 2021 has had some major changes, and I think that we just need to have a discussion about it and come together as a community and figure out how to navigate it. So to start off each podcast, I'm going to share some encouraging piece of advice to kind of go along with what we're talking about today. So the quote today is that it's better to wait long than to marry wrong. And I think that we see waiting as a bad thing. We always associate it with inconvenience. So just think about if you're waiting for food at your favorite restaurant and they say that the wait's 20 minutes or that they'll bring you McDonald's as soon as they can. You wouldn't do that, right? You wouldn't make that switch. You came there to get that specific meal from that place. Now screams loud, but later screams longer. And don't ever sacrifice something so important like marriage just to settle for something quick and convenient. Nothing worth having comes easy. So now let's get right into today's topic with the All the Glory podcast. So to start off, we're going to be talking about the initial reelin. What I mean by this is what you catch. What type of guys you attract. My boyfriend Seth, he absolutely loves fishing. He had this certain type of bait, which actually caught me 3 different type of fish that I do not know the name of. But what he did is he put out, determined what the type of fish we would pull in. And the same goes as when we meet people. What you put off and reel out there determines the type of man you're going to attract. If you want someone who respects your body, doesn't hit on other girls, is a loyal person, and sees you for your inner beauty, you won't accomplish that by baiting them on Instagram with a revealing photo. What type of attention do you want to attract? Because a lot of attention or a lot of likes on social media necessarily does not mean that it's the right kind of attention. I think one of the best things when it comes to trying to attract someone is to try to be that person that you want to find. The person God has for you will be revealed in time. And sometimes it's exactly what you thought it would be, and sometimes it comes at the weirdest time and it's not what you imagine. For me, I absolutely love speaking. I love drawing people closer to God and seeing their journey, and God knows that. I always said my husband would be met at church, and he would be a pastor or youth leader, whatever. And I was really stern about that. I would literally diss any man who did not meet those categories, and I know that's super terrible, and I am sorry for the men that I did that to. But it all ended up well. So I met Seth. He's amazing, and he opened the door for me on our first date. He was so sweet and gentle. We had great conversations, and he completely respected me. But he was not the type of man who necessarily met my credentials. Honestly, he was a small-town country boy who was a little wild. Nothing too crazy, but a lot more wilder than me, which is definitely not hard to accomplish or do at all. So I friend-zoned every guy before him, but for some reason, there was something different about him that I could not let go. I felt so drawn to him, and I had no idea why. I talked to one of my best friends, Bailey, about it, and I filled her in on absolutely everything. I told her how much I liked him, how great our conversations were, the respect I got from him, and how I literally just could not stop thinking about him. I was so drawn to him, more than I had ever been drawn to anyone in my entire life. We got along great. We had amazing conversations, and it honestly was everything that I had dreamed of as a person. And I told her even, like, he had all of the categories of a godly man. He was so nice. He respected me. He led me. He opened the door for me. He made me feel safe. All these different types of things that he did, but he didn't know it. Like, he didn't know that those were godly man qualities. The only thing he didn't have is, like, he wasn't super there when it came to religion. Like, he was Christian. He said he believed in God, of course. He believed in Jesus. But he didn't really know how to get there. He didn't know how to get closer. He didn't know how to really take that role in. So I told Bailey everything about it, and she knew it all. She encouraged me that I needed to let God do the work, and that all I really had to do is sit back and be myself. So I invited him to church with me. We had conversations about it, and I just sat back and I let him see God through me and how I acted. And there's a lot more to this story, but long story short, he took a journey with God on his own. Now, he checks me daily. He encourages me. He's the best partner I could literally ever ask for. He was in a men's Bible study at the church that we go to, and it's amazing. Like, this journey I watched him go on made my faith even stronger, and I got to walk alongside him and see him change from somebody who was so lost in this world to discipling his friends and trying to bring them to church. And he's by no means a perfect person, but he's perfect for me. And I think the most amazing thing about sitting back and watching this is how he talks to me about conversations. Like, I'll tell him, listen, I'm writing this for my blog post, and I saw this quote that I really like, and he sits there and explains to me all of it and how he feels about it and where God is in it and identifying things and checking me. And it's literally amazing because it makes me appreciate him and it makes me appreciate God so much more because I saw that transition. So I didn't just meet him and we were like, oh yeah, we click right away, which we did click, but he had to go on this journey with God. And the fact that I got to watch that, anytime that he has a conversation with me about the Lord, I am just astonished. Like, I am amazed. I am so much more in love with him now, and I think that God did that on purpose, is because he knew that I was going to be able to see the journey this guy went on, and he knew I would fall in love with him in the process of it. He knew I was doing what I love to do, which is disciple others, so it kind of got two birds with one stone, but it made me love Seth so much deeper, and I'll always appreciate watching him go on that journey as he watches me still go on my journey. So our relationship was not how I planned it in my head. God orchestrated it the way that he needed to, and he worked through me to gain another one for the kingdom. And I got to watch Seth be baptized and see Jesus work through somebody I love. And my main point here is, don't make up how your future relationship has to be in your head. You have to have some list of good traits in a man, obviously, things you want to look for, things that are non-negotiable. Have an idea of where you want to look for this person at. But let God write it, because he is the author anyway. Seth wanted to learn about God, and he needed community to encourage him towards that. And you can't always blame people because they didn't grow up the same way you did, or they grew up a little bit different. It's really about the now, and I knew Jesus would never turn anybody away who wasn't super religious. So just to kind of wrap up what we talked about, I think we can go a lot deeper into that, because I do want to make the point that me and Seth are equally yoked now. And we both have our own relationship with God. We both strive to try to be more like Jesus every day, and we're kind of growing into that Christian relationship every single day more and more. And he is totally there for me when it comes to my relationship with God. He encourages me. He has his own thing that he does separately, and we are totally there now together. So I want to just really push that point home, that if somebody really wants to know Jesus and you're willing to go along with them for that, you feel a pull, you feel like it's God's plan, you pray about it, you have discernment, and you realize that, I think God does want me to help disciple this person, and in reality, you guys end up being together. That's an amazing thing. But I do want to say, at the end of the day, like I said in the beginning of this podcast, you don't want to take something like marriage, that's so important and amazing, and sacrifice it. So if that person is not willing to get there, or you're getting a lot of beating around the bush, which this conversation, like I said, could go so much deeper and could be really long, but I just want to say you do need to be equally yoked with someone, and I want to really push that point home, because you don't want to give that up, and that's not something that you can settle to have without. Because in reality, this person you're marrying is going to be the father who raises your children. He's going to be the one that's there for you in the hospital bed when you're having children. He's going to be there for every event and every scenario that happens in your life, and you need someone to encourage you along the way, to bring you back to God, to encourage you that it's going to be okay and that you don't need to be afraid. And if you don't have that, that's giving up a really huge thing. That's settling for something that you should not settle for. So make sure that you become equally yoked with that person. It may take time, it may take effort, you may be the one who needs to have a stronger relationship with God, or vice versa, which is okay. But there needs to come to a point where, if it's not getting there, and if you're becoming more discouraged, or you're getting farther away from God, and you realize that you're giving up something, do not settle for that. And I really encourage you to pray about it, to pray that if this is the person for you, for God to show you. So for part 2 of the podcast, I have a special guest with me, and I'm going to introduce him. His name is Seth Burcham, also known as my boyfriend. I shared some of our stories in the beginning, so I'm going to kind of give him the mic and let him introduce himself.
I'm Seth, Carly's boyfriend. I'm 22 years old, and me and Carly have been together since September 6th of 2020. We met in 5th grade, and I've had a crush on her ever since, believe it or not. And I'm a machinist for a living. I'm in a journeyman apprenticeship that I graduate from in 2023. And this is kind of going to be me and Carly's story, and also my story in faith, and we'll touch on hers a little bit as well.
Okay, so the first question I'm going to ask you, Seth, to kind of just let the people know you, is just to know your personal relationship with God and kind of your journey and how you came to faith and just kind of like your testimony a little bit.
My journey with faith started when I was fairly young. Um, I attended church when I was a very young child, and then I attended a youth group for a few years in my, I think it was preteen, but almost teenage years. I would say like 10 to 12, probably something like that. And then I had a falling out with faith till I turned 21. And then, I mean, everything that preceded preteen to 21 was pretty much fulfilled with bad choices, bad friends, and substances. So, I mean, I'm not too proud of that part of my life, but we're all able to redeem ourselves thankfully through our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. But yeah, when I met Carly, she just kind of helped me get back to where I wanted to be with faith, and it took a little bit at first to like get out of my routine. I started going to church with her at Calvary in Valpo, and it's been great ever since. I joined a men's Bible study as well, and that helped out a lot. And I've been choosing devotionals for us, and we read through the Bible pretty frequently and discuss topics.
Okay, so the next question is, what was a funny story or anything that you want to share about our first date / when we first started dating?
Okay, well, there's a lot of fun and funny memories from that time of our relationship, but for our first date, I chose to take Carly to this diner in Michigan City, and it's right on the river by Blue Chip. And the day that I chose to take her there, I had no idea that the place was going to be closed, but she had already known that, but she didn't tell me. And so we drove all the way out there, and we're sitting in the parking lot. I'm like, wow, there's nobody here. And I was like, is it closed? And I looked it up, and sure enough, it was closed. And she didn't say a word to me or anything. So we drove all the way to Chesterton from Michigan City, and we went to this Mexican restaurant, and we ordered this food. And, of course, neither of us ate anything. We were just talking the entire time. But come to find out, the reason that she didn't tell me that it was closed was because she wanted to have more time to talk to me, which I thought was really, really kind of funny and cute, that she would do that.
Which is completely true. And the reason that I did do that is because at first I was like kind of awkward. I was like, I don't want to tell him that it was closed because we really weren't that close at all. Like, it was our first date. But I also did kind of want to have more time for conversation, and I wanted to see how you handled conflict. Because, like, it was kind of embarrassing that you were like, oh my gosh, this is closed. And thought it would be good to see how you handled that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I'm glad you didn't tell me at the time that you knew already, because I probably been like, why? Why didn't you tell me then? We drove all the way out here. But, like, after the fact, I just thought it was really funny and cute that she would want to do that.
No, I thought it was fun too. It worked out. Okay, so the next question is what, like, sorry, I can't talk. What was the type of fears that you had when we first started dating?
I mean, I had a lot of fear when we first started dating because, like, I was always kind of intimidated by Carly because, I mean, if you know Carly, you know that she's gorgeous, so it's kind of intimidating. But she's very smart and beautiful, and when we first like began to date, she would call me out when I would do like dumb and stupid things. Because I mean, I tended to be kind of malicious, we'll say, back before me and Carly got together, and she would always like call me out on it, when I would say stupid things or do dumb things, and like I was like, oh wow, like this is not good for me in that way, so I'm gonna have to try to turn this around. But now I've adjusted to how like a relationship should be with her, and I mean how to live like the Christian life, and it's been a blast ever since. I couldn't be happier.
No, I agree, and I don't think it was necessarily malicious, but like as a girl, you care more about people's feelings. I feel like that's probably like mean to say, but like girls think more about emotions, and like I feel like, I mean, I guess it varies on the person, but I tend to think more about, okay, how could you word that better to like make it not come off in certain ways, whatever. But he was just used to being a dude working in a machine shop, saying things, and I was like, oh my gosh, no, don't say it, that's offensive. And like it wasn't terrible, but I just definitely, like, you weren't used to being around a girl. You were out of a relationship for 2 years, right?
Yeah, I'd been out for about 2 years at that point, so I mean I wasn't very used to having a companion of that capacity,
Right.
so it was just kind of hard to adjust to at first, but it benefited me in so many ways. Like, I just learned how to be, like, patient and, like, not so judgmental of other people.
What is the most fun or like exciting thing about our relationship to you?
we have deep communications very, very frequently, and I think that's very helpful in our relationship, like in particular, because that way we know each other's feelings. There's
Right.
like there's not a lot of self-doubt or like concern in that aspect because we have these conversations so often that we know how we feel. Like we know what bothers us, we know the issues we're having, or we know like what we like about the other person or what they do well. And it's just very helpful in our relationship, and I'm sure that it would be in anyone else's.
Just like naturally, it's just like my personality. I just crave deep conversations with people about like very personal things. And any of my friends know that. Like my one best friend Bethany, like she knows I just am always full of questions. I just naturally ask so many questions. I don't know why, I just am like that. So that's why on our first date we didn't eat, because all I did was ask questions the whole time. Like we probably felt like you were on a news interview, which is why this podcast is great for me, because I ask so many questions all the time and just crave deep conversations with people, which is really good for us.
Yeah, I mean, if you weren't in nursing school, I would have definitely thought that you were going to be like a reporter of some kind. Like, I swear, it's either that or an FBI agent. Like any ongoings that happen in my life, Carly immediately is like, boom, on it, like that. She's like, oh, this, and this happened. I'm like, how do you even know that?
I'm really, yes, that's true. That should have been my two avenues that I should have like had as a backup. Have you had any like epiphanies or just come to realize moments when we were dating?
Dating Carl, there's been a lot of like self-inflicted changes in my life. But I think my most important revelation had to be accepting people before I'm judgmental of people, I would say, like, and she really helped me like overcome that and be more like accepting of people that I didn't know. And I think that's definitely helped me a lot in life.
What was the most embarrassing story for us dating?
This one in particular, we were early on dating, maybe a month or two or something, and we were driving in neighboring town, Valpo, and there's a lot of traffic lights in Valpo, like they're everywhere, and I don't know if it was because I was super nervous or what. I would assume it's probably was because we had just started dating, and there was this red light, and for some reason I don't know why. I think we were talking, or maybe she was looking at me or something. And I was like shaking, probably like a leaf, but. I stopped at this stoplight that was red, like a stop sign. Like, I just stopped and I blew through it. And Carly just looks over at me and goes, Seth, that was a red light. I was like, oh, sorry. And I just kept driving. I was like, oh my God, she's going to think I'm crazy.
We kind of made a script about it. When he first told me that, I was like, I don't even remember that. And I think a lot of the times when you go on dates with people, you're like, oh my gosh, I have to act a certain way. I have to do a certain way because you're worried about what they're going to think. But most of the time, I don't think people care. Like, you totally don't even remember those embarrassing moments from first dates.
I think that a lot of people just they're so nervous. Most importantly, you should always just be yourself, because that first impression, if they don't like who you are, then it's not going to work out anyway.
Right. Well, last question is, if you do know that I'm the one, how and when?
Such a comedian over here. But when or how did I know? Well, I've sort of always known, and I mean, it started on the first date. I knew that she was definitely someone that I wanted to pursue and definitely like have in my life for sure, like without any doubt. And I've always chased her. I mean, since we met in 5th grade, I've always been like totally obsessed. Yes, infatuated, we'll say. And like I just at this point in time, I don't think that I could have ever ended up with anyone else, and I definitely could not like go on living without her. Like I don't know what I would do.
Okay, so now we're going to get into the really important and juicy stuff. And this is all just going to be about relationships and Christian marriages, and just for the single people, for the dating people, for basically anybody, honestly, this podcast can benefit. So we're going to start off by talking about what exactly is a Christian marriage/relationship to you.
Two people both serving each other, and you put the other person first. So then, if both spouses are both putting each other first, you're fulfilling each other. It's not one or the other. Like, you don't have one that's serving the other and the other serving themselves. You both serve each other so that you both benefit, so no one is left out. It's 100% equal, and there's no bias in the relationship. and you also both abide in Christ and pour that support into each other equally as well.
I think that's really important to both have a foundation with God. Obviously, if somebody's weaker and needs to be brought up, that could totally be worked through and whatever. But I think at the end of the day, before you get engaged, you should definitely be equal, for sure.
I think before you get married, you almost need to be as equal as possible, because you're going to be feeding into each other. Your decisions that you make are going to be based on faith, because I mean everything we do is for God, like every choice that we make and everything that we do is in his name.
How do you think you personally, or like anybody, what is some good advice to put God first in your relationship? Like, what does that look like to you?
Well, putting God first in your relationship would, I think that it would entail treating your partner with respect, and in a very caring manner, reading the Bible often as you can. Devotionals, trying to push God to be first, and most importantly, you need to anchor God in between you and your partner, so that you can bounce off of each other that way. And as long as you have God in the center of your relationship, you can't go wrong, because it's going to turn into almost like a triangle. Like you're going to feed into God, he's going to feed into you, your partner's going to feed into God, God's going to feed into your partner, and then you and your partner are going to feed into each other, and it's just it's a revolving door of love and respect and wisdom that's going to pour forth throughout your entire relationship.
Exactly. I totally agree. And we were kind of talking about this yesterday too, and talking about forgiving each other and how we even have the fuel to do that. And I just, like I said, I asked so many questions, so I'll ask Seth like every other week. So what did you learn about me today? Or what's your favorite characteristic about me today? Like, I just asked all these questions. And then you said to me, your patience. And I was like, yeah, but like, I don't feel like I have any patience at all, like ever, And then I started thinking about it, and I was like, the days that I read the Bible and, I have my morning routine, I have my quiet time with Jesus and everything, then I'm way more patient with Seth or with my family, with anyone really, when I'm like coming to God first to refill my cup. You know what I mean? And I think that's important, because you can't be patient as a human being without God being involved. Like, it's just not possible, because we're so full of like selfish desires and sin and just wanting to put like ourselves before everybody else. So when you don't go to God for that, it's really hard to give patience to other people or to even forgive them for stuff, because there's no reason to, if you're not really rooted in God. But when as a Christian, it's like, okay, well, he forgives me every day, and anything that I do, I know that he will forgive me, and he already knows my sins before I do them. And it's just really easy in that way to forgive your partner and to be patient with them when you go to God first for it. My next question is, how can you prepare for your marriage while you're dating, or you're in a season where you're awaiting?
The best way to prepare for a marriage while dating is be upfront with all your past burdens and skeletons that are in your closet. You have to drag it out in the open. You can't try to hide it, because your partner's going to find out. And if they find out while you're married, that could be very bad. Like, you have to be upfront. It's not fair to them. They have to know everything about your past when it comes to relationships and things that you've done that you want to hide, because if you don't, it's going to destroy your marriage, and then you're both going to be at a true loss. And most importantly, just be truthful and honest with them about everything. Like, anything they ask you, just be upfront about it. You need to become best friends before you're intimate based on, physical attraction, because it's going to be who you spend most of your time with, and you don't want it to be based on physical things. You want it to be based on emotional and just being their best friend, because you're going to spend the rest of your life with them. And also, just don't think of marriage as a status symbol. It's supposed to be a union between two people for eternity, and I just think that more often than not, it's kind of seen as like a status. Like, everybody's like, oh, I want to get married, but like, why? Why do you want to get married? Is it because you want to be with him forever, or is it because you want a ring or whatever? Some material benefit. It shouldn't be about that. It should just be, the person that's your best friend, that you love, that you want to spend the rest of eternity with, at least earthly.
No, I agree, and I think that sometimes people want to rush into marriage because they want to not be lonely, or because a lot of people are doing it. And you get out of college and you're like, okay, now what do I do? Like, live alone? Like, what are you supposed to do when you do that? You know, naturally your next thing is to like find a partner and stuff. So just make sure your intentions are pure before you even think about an engagement or marriage, and just make sure that it's actually really your partner that you want to be with, and not just you daydreaming about wedding planning and stuff. Now we're going to talk about just general pieces of advice kind of when it comes to relationships.
I think that it's important to build that foundation of friendship before you build a foundation of like, intimacy, and spend a lot of time together and learn about them inside and out. Communication is going to be key. Learn how to communicate, and so you can kind of form a team. Before you get super involved, you need to form a team so you can work together well and understand and compromise, and so that when you do fight about silly things or argue, then you can hug at the end of it and love each other and not want to rip each other's heads off.
So the next question is, what do you think is the biggest struggle as a man in the dating world?
I think the biggest trouble as a man in the dating world today is going to be running into women who have been broken by other men. Because, like, in this day and age, dating has kind of turned into, like, a game almost. Like, it's not like a lot of people that I've seen around, not everyone, but a lot of them are just dating because they're bored. And that's the main issue, is because, a lot of these, like, men are mostly the ones that are dating because they're bored, for the most part. Like, in my experience. So you have all these young women that are just trying to find their way in life and find their partner, and all these guys are just like wanting to hook up or just bored, so they just play with their hearts, and then they develop trust issues, and they're scared to date anyone, and they're scared to open up to anyone, and it's that's one of your biggest issues.
So the next question would be, what is the best thing you think a guy can offer a girl when it comes to dating? So, like, something that the girl should look for. The best thing that he can offer her.
I think the best thing that he can offer her is definitely respect. And when I say respect, I mean like opening doors, being polite, trying to get to know her, not like trying to physically touch her like immediately. Like just taking it easy, being vulnerable to her and polite, and just trying to get to know her better. And I also think that like the whole vulnerable stigma with men is totally preposterous. Like it's silly that men have to be like like stone cold ice men all the time. Like they can't show emotion, or it's like it's frowned upon.
I agree, and I think that men being vulnerable with women and telling them their emotions, it takes away a lot of pain and the whole confusion around dating. So when you first start dating in the beginning, you don't really know much about each other, and I'm like, okay, do you like me? Do you not like me? Is this serious? Are you still like Snapchatting other girls? Do you have streaks with other girls? There's so many unknown things just because you don't talk. It's all miscommunication. You don't tell them. So it's better to over communicate your feelings than under communicate them. But at the same time, not every thought or emotion that comes into your head has to be acted on either. So you need to kind of filter it through. Think, okay, am I sharing too much with them? Am I sharing too little? Just be honest. Be straight up, because it will take all the confusion and all the hard times, I think, out of the first few months of dating when it's pretty new. Next question, what would be some pieces of advice that you would give your daughter trying to navigate the dating world?
I would say don't settle for someone who doesn't have like your best interest at heart. I mean, don't.
But how would they know about like what interests they even have? Like, how do you know that as a girl? What's the interest of the guy?
Well, I mean, you don't want someone that's mean to you or like isn't considerate of your feelings. Like you don't want to date someone like that. So just be cautious and selective. It's way better to be selective and not date for a while than it is to have tons of boyfriends that are all jerks. And also like just don't be afraid to ask for help or advice from like me or your mother, because like we've been through a lot together already. So I'm sure by the time that we have daughters that are of dating age, then we're gonna have a lot of stories and a lot of experience when it comes to things like that. And uh, ask a lot of questions. If something seems off, or your boyfriend or potential boyfriend does something that you don't really like, definitely ask about it to try to figure out like why he or she did that or whatever. But just make sure of that, and just always remember that no matter what, You can always come back and live with mom and dad.
That's good. And I think for a girl, like, always see where their priorities are. So obviously, everyone's priority is going to be different when you first start dating. You know, you may prioritize working out more or something for yourself a little bit more. But then once you really do start getting into that, I mean, that person should be your priority as well, you know? So if you don't rank at one of the top of their list as a priority in their life and they're kind of neglecting you and, you know, really being self-absorbed or focusing a lot on themselves and not you, that could kind of evaluate whether they do have your best interest at heart, is where you fall on their scale. Okay, so let's say that the daughter does pass the stage where she thinks that he has her best interest. So, how do you know if you've met the one or not?
In my experience, I've only ever met one.
Really? That's so weird.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
That's crazy.
But you're going to have intense butterflies, very, very nervous. At least in my case, this is how it was for me.
Are you still nervous?
I'm always nervous. But you're going to feel like you're going crazy at first. I got a lot of signs from God that I didn't even know were signs at the time. Like, looking back on it, I'm like, wow. Like, the Holy Spirit was hitting me in the head with a baseball bat, and I didn't even know it. But, like me and Carly would be having conversations about, like, philosophy or, like, just, like, any, like, everyday things when we would go to church, and our preacher Josh would literally talk about it, like word for word exactly what we were talking about. Like, I wonder what this is. Like, I wonder why the sky's blue. And like literally we would go to church and he'd be like, the sky's blue because of this, this, and this, and we just looking at each other like, we just talked about this yesterday. Like, you kind of feel like you're going crazy, but like the signs are just there. It's about how you get along together. Like talking, how your like conversations flow. If it's easy to talk to them, like if you can just strike up a conversation about absolutely nothing and talk for an hour and a half on the phone about nothing together, like that's how you know you're like it's definitely the one. I think that like another thing is that like being away from them.
I think that when it comes to how often you hang out with your partner, everybody's different because some people like to be independent and they don't want to spend every single minute, and some people want to travel and like, you know what I mean? I think it just honestly varies per relationship. So I don't really know if that's something that you could like too much elaborate on, but I think something that you do have to remember is if this is the person you're thinking about, you will have to live with them no matter what. So if you think that living with them would make you lose your mind and like it's just, you know, you don't really want to do it, you should probably reevaluate if that is the person for yourself. And it sounds really simple, but I've been in situations where I'm talking or just Snapchatting, casually talking to a guy or whatever, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I would not want to hang out with them every day. So what's the point of even being with them if you could not live with them in the same house? You probably shouldn't take it any further, right?
I definitely agree. I mean, to each his own with like your schedules and stuff. Like everybody's gonna be different, but if it's not someone that you could look at and say, yes, I could definitely wake up next to them every single day for the rest of my life, you shouldn't be dating them, because dating is not just like, it's not just like to pass the time. It's supposed to be a stepping stone to marriage. Like it's supposed to be like a trial. It's supposed to be like, don't take it the wrong way, but like test driving a car. Like you're not gonna just go buy a car without driving it.
Right.
Like, not that you're buying the other person, but you know what I mean.
No, yeah, like you have to it's like like you said, it is like a trial run, and you're just it's always moving. And I always tell it to my friends too, like if your relationship isn't progressing and moving and changing, you need to evaluate if it's where it's going, because I think that shows you a lot is if you can look back at your relationship in a year and see if it's changed or not. And if there's nothing really changed with someone's behavior or, you know, your faith in God together and just stuff like that, there should be, you know, some progress there. Everybody's progress, some slower, some seasons, some months, you feel like you're arguing a little bit more, stuff like that. But ultimately, I think you should be able to look back, especially after a year, and see a lot of progress there. Okay, so we talked a little bit earlier about how it's really hard as a guy, you were saying, to navigate dating a girl who's been damaged and hurt by other guys, right?
A lot of women have been damaged by other men, so they have a lot of reservations and possible insecurities because of those traumatic instances. And sometimes it's kind of frustrating to be in a relationship with someone like that, and it might seem like almost too difficult, but It's really not, because you got to think the reason that they feel that way is because they're scared. It's not because they don't trust you or they don't want to be with you. It's because they're afraid. Because they don't want to get hurt like that again. Like, emotional hurt is one of the worst pains you can ever have. It's terrible. But I just think the most important thing is reassurance. Like, you need to reassure them that you're not going to leave them, or you're not going to hurt them, or you're not going to cheat on them. Whatever their insecurities are, you have to, like, medicate those, and you have to just try your best to remind them as often as possible of how much you care about them and how good they look, and compliment their outfits and what they're doing for you, and let them know that they're appreciated, because that might be one of the reasons why they feel so insecure, is because they don't think that they're appreciated by you.
I agree, and I think coming from a girl's perspective of being hurt, dealing with that before you jump into another relationship is very beneficial. I mean, you're still going to have some hurt, obviously. You're still going to have some trust issues, and that'll have to, I think that could be healed with time and God, obviously. But after you've been hurt from a relationship, taking time to let God heal that and to get all those insecurities try to mapped out and figured out, to know that Jesus loves you, that, you know, Jesus thinks that you're beautiful, and that just because you got hurt by somebody else doesn't mean that you're going to be hurt by another person. You know, just dealing with those yourself personally before you jump in with somebody else. So it's not completely fair to another person to jump right in with them and to make them deal with all your problems either. I mean, that's not really fair. So I think that, like you said, that's really important, and to just have patience with them. And if your partner does do something, to be like, okay, what makes you think that, or what led you to that? And most of the time, well, you know, my ex would do this, which is really terrible that happens, but a lot of the time that's what happens. And instead of, like, people just being like, oh, well, I'm not your ex, that's not it. You know, like, it's more like, okay, you've been hurt by that, I understand that, how can I help that? And how can, you know, I try to mend that for you, and just reassure them that that's not your intentions. So how would you think you would describe a perfect relationship in your eyes?
I think a perfect relationship in my eyes is, I mean, I think every relationship that works is perfectly imperfect in its own way. Definitely someone you can love with, cry with, someone that fully comprehends you, you know, who, like, gets you. You know, like, even with, like, your whatever personality traits you have, you need someone that understands you. Because if you don't, you're going to have a lot of miscommunication, and miscommunication is bad. That's a relationship killer.
Is that coming from personal experience?
No, not at all. Why would it be coming from personal experience? But for sure, and so someone you can also compromise with, because compromisation is the key to relationships. Like, you're coming from two different backgrounds, two different sets of parents, some broken families, some non-broken families. There's so many variables of your upbringing, and, like, your brain's like a computer. Like, all computers are wired differently, and the way you're wired is the way you're going to be. Like, from the age of 0 to 4 is when you pretty much learn everything. After that, it's just, like, just little simple things. Like, you learn how to walk, you learn how to talk, you learn how to eat. Like, just, like, that's your basic skills that you learn from 0 to 4, and everything after that is based on your parents. Like, that's the only thing we have in common from 0 to 4 is just, you know, just the basic stuff. That's all we have in common. Everything else comes from your parents. So you're going to be completely different. You have to compromise. You're going to need to compromise, and if you don't, it's not going to work, or you're going to have a horrible relationship. Like, you both need to be happy. It's not just one or the other.
Right. I agree, and I think that's important. What you said is everybody grows up differently, and everybody has different ways that they view the world based on how they were raised. So remembering and having grace to your partner, like, okay, I expect you, you know, to do the dishes X, Y, Z days a week, and blah, blah, because that's how you were raised. But maybe your partner, their parents didn't make them do that. And it's not necessarily that your partner's being lazy when they're not doing the dishes. It's just that's not how they were raised. They were raised that the mom does them or whatever, and that they don't have to help. So just before you jump the gun, realize they weren't raised the same way. And hey, you know what? I was raised this way. How were you raised? Like, how can we come together to understand each other rather than just attacking each other? Another thing that I think confused me was, like, talking about parents and stuff, how to view arguments. So I always viewed arguments as a bad thing, as a negative connotation, and things that just, you know, were a disaster. And if you argued or had any disagreements, that you were just meant to move on and be with somebody else. So obviously my view of that changed. And I want to know how you view arguments in your eyes, Seth.
Well, I think that most of your arguments are going to come from yet again compromise or a lack of it, because I mean, I think that like arguments is taken way out of context most of the time because mostly it's just disagreements. Like big full blown arguments very rarely happen unless you're like totally toxic for each other.
Yeah.
But most decent couples just have disagreements. That very healthy civil conversations without threats, put downs, without being unhealthy or threatening is a disagreement. And anything opposite of that would be considered an argument. But I just think that like you need to like personally hold hands. Like I think you should hold hands when you like disagree.
Do you always hold my hand when you disagree with me?
No, sometimes I falter, but I mean I think everyone does. But I think it's important to maintain physical contact and just remember that at the end of your disagreement, no matter how it ends up, just remember one thing from both sides. Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy?
I agree. And I think that knowing a healthy argument from a bad argument is like, does that other person still show you respect during the argument?
I agree completely, and I mean, like, if the respect goes completely out the window every time you have a disagreement, that's a problem.
Because then they're like, that's like stepping over the line. Like an argument can be like, hey, you know what? I don't agree with this. Like we word it as disagreements. We do not say it as an argument because there's a level of respect that should not be passed up just because you have a disagreement or just because you need to talk something out. It's healthy to talk things out, but it's how you respect and still love your partner while talking it out. If they completely bash you, put you down, throw your past in your face, and just overall walk all over you, and for it to be a toxic situation, I would view that as a bad argument. But disagreements and like conversations, they do need to happen because I think it clears up a lot of things, and you should leave every disagreement better, in my opinion. And me and Seth were talking, and we were just talking about how we knew or whatever, and I was saying something that the reason I knew that this was a different relationship than my past ones is because whenever we leave a disagreement, give it like 20 minutes, and I'm like, wow, like our relationship's so much better now because we had that conversation, and then most of the time it doesn't get brought up again. Like it was a problem that could have been easily solved by a conversation, and we had to run into that disagreement to be able to talk it through so it didn't happen again. So I think the disagreements can better you if you let them. And if the disagreements are more just about like your selfish desires or like you said, you don't want to compromise and stuff like that, obviously it could reoccur. But if you both view the disagreement as you and me versus the disagreement, or is it you versus your partner? Because you versus your partner is an argument. Me and you versus the problem is a disagreement. So I think this podcast has been very good, and I really hope that you guys learned a lot about relationships and just about what to look for in a guy and a girl, and just from a guy's perspective, because so many times we don't know how guys view us, and they're confusing, and a lot of the times it's like this is hopeless trying to find a partner. But I really just do pray that all you girls out there who don't have a relationship, just that God's working out this season that you're in right now. There's a reason you're in this season. You're not alone in it, and I hope you realize that relationships are a lot of work just from these conversations that we've been having today. And, it'll come in the exact right time and that God wants it for you.